Hi folks, the next little video I have in the R32 is going to be the coolant change or antifreeze. You'll see here I have the OE Quantum antifreeze. I have 10 litres of this. From memory, the coolant system takes a little over 5 litres, so obviously I had to buy 2 tubs. I also have deionized water here as well. I happen to have this from another wee project, so I'm going to use it. You can of course use normal tap water or any water you have. It's up to yourselves, arguments galore about it, so use whatever you're happy with, but in this case I'm going to be using deionized water. You'll see I also have a little drip tray here too. This is obviously going to be to collect the coolant as it drains out. Mixing jug here, you want a 50-50 mix between the coolant and the deionized water. To get the under tray off, you're going to need your Torx bits as well, so I have a small set here, and then things like pliers to get some of the hose clamps off. So you don't need any major fancy tools by any means, and it's certainly something as per usual that you can do as a DIY. So I'll get the car lifted up now and start into getting underneath it. Okay folks, you should see 4 very rusty screw heads here. These are the 4 T25 Torx bits or Torx screws that hold on the under tray on this side. There's a mirrored 4 on the other side of the under tray as well, so you obviously want to remove these. So let's get cracking. Okay, as you can see that's that side pretty loose now, so time to move on to the other side. Okay folks, over now to the other side, so time to get these 4 off. Okay, now it's just a case of grabbing the under tray and giving it a tug to release it, like so. Okay folks, hopefully you can see where my hand is here. This is the lower radiator hose on the R32. A bit like the GTIs and other VAG range of cars, there is actually we sort of speed disconnect things. It's like a wire clip that captively holds it onto the end of the radiator. They commonly rust out and probably aren't worth the hassle of trying to disconnect them, while mine, they seem actually very fresh. I'm actually just going to use the traditional hose clamp method. Undo this hose clamp, pull this hose off, obviously have the drip tray beneath it here, and drain it out. If I move the camera back, I'll show you another hose here as well. This hose here, hopefully you can see, this is another lower point in the radiator. I'm going to disconnect one of these hose clamps as well, just really to try and drain out as much of the water as possible. I'll get my pliers and stuff ready, try and rotate this hose clamp clip round. It's very uncomfortably at the top, so try and turn that round for ease of access. Get the drip tray under it, release it, and hopefully drain out the fluid. I'll try and use the hose clamp till here. Take out pliers, it's got wee clips on it. It should be like a lot easier. Okay, you can see that's the hose clamp released. Try and just get this past the notch of the actual radiator hose here. Okay, that's it out of the way. Now, at the risk of covering myself, I'll move this a wee bit further up. Let's get into the front bit. You can see there's the first wee dribble of the coolant coming out. So let's see if we can wiggle this hose out. You can see that's it coming out already, hopefully. I'll move the camera maybe to give you a better view here. I will run up to the engine bay and release the overflow cap as well, and that should help it drain out a bit quicker as well. Okay, time to move on to this smaller hose clamp here as well. Let's get this disconnected. There we go. I'll release that and get this out of the way. Let's see if we can get this hose pulled off as well and knock the camera at the same time. Yep, you can see, hopefully see there's a wee couple of drips coming out already. I'll shift you around to this angle where you might see a bit better. Sorry for knocking the camera there, but just trying to use a set of pliers there just to give me a wee bit of leverage there. Let's come out a bit more. There we go, just let this sucker drain out. Good to see the fluid looks good and clean anyway. It's not like it's loaded up with rust or anything like that. So I'll leave that to drain for a wee while and come back to you. Okay, hopefully you can see down there the upper radiator hose. The next plan will be to try and loosen this. Not essential, but my aim will be to try and flush out the radiator from above. See if we'll have the clearance to get into this. I don't think we do, so I'm going to get a set of traditional pliers and pop this off. Okay, that's that off. Try and tangle the hose. Okay, obviously there isn't really any fluid coming out there, but I'm just popping that out of the way. The idea will be I'll be sticking the hose nozzle into this and flushing out the radiator, but it also allows a lot more air to get into the radiator as well, so you may well hear on the camera that there's a bit more water started draining out of the radiator. So I'll let that finish draining off. As you'll see, that's the coolant dripping down to pretty much nothing now. So my next stage is going to be to grab all the containers of coolant and package them up so I can dispose of them properly. Hopefully your local refuse centre should be okay to take coolant, because an awful lot of them don't. So I'll get these out of the way. That's the coolant drained. I'm going to grab the garden hose now, rinse it all through, and then connect up all the hoses back up and start filling the system. So I'll be back with the hose now. And putting the hose into the top of the radiator now as well. You can see there's a bit of pushback from the water there as I try to fill it, so make sure you try not to obviously soak your wiring connectors and things that are beneath it, but a sort of gradual squirt every now and then should start pushing it out. Okay, I can see the water from the radiators running out very clear. So yeah, that's pretty much the coolant system flushed out quickly. It's obviously not perfect. Ideally you want to pressurize the system and flush out the heater core and all as well, but this is a good practical way to do it, and you're obviously replacing with fresh coolant as well, so it's a good way to do it, and it's a relatively easy DIY job. Time now to start putting these hoses all back together and seal the system up. Okie dokie, time to connect up the first hose here. This is the top radiator hose. Actually connect this, put the hose back on first before trying to move the hose clip, make life a bit easier. There we go, a bit easier with the right tools. I just used my hose clamp removal tool, put it onto the air scoop there, and obviously managed to get the clamp on in place. And it's in exactly the same place on the hose as it was previously, the same sort of recess or marks where the hose was. Anyway, time to jump back onto the car and connect up the two hoses we removed there. Okie dokie, time to move on to the first hose underneath, and let's get it connected back up. And maybe just while I have the clearance to do it easily, connect this jobby back up too. Okay. Okay, that's it, fully seated down against that stop. Trying to move the hose clamp now. Happy days, folks. Time to finally get that hose clamp on there. It's been a wee bit tricky. Ended up using an old set of pliers, big thick chunky guys, just to get a hold in the hose clamp. These guys here, they managed to give it have enough strength really to open up that hose clamp properly and slide it back on. But yep, that's everything seated perfectly. Time to move on to the far larger hose and connect it back up. Okay, now up at the lower hose, let's get this connected back on. Okay, that's down at its stop. Now this hose clamp. Okay, that's it wiggled on. Move the connector up a little bit. So, and that's a connector up out of the way. It's not going to rattle off the under tray or anything, but out of courtesy, should another mechanic or DIYer come along, at least you're leaving the hose connector accessible as opposed to leaving it at the top and making life awkward. But anyway, that's all the hoses connected up and sealed with hose clamps. Time to start making up the mixture of coolant and antifreeze, or coolant, antifreeze and the distilled water. Okay, time to start mixing up the coolant mixtures. I'm going for a 50-50 mix here. So let's pop the cap off here. So this is just what I have handy. This is a 2 litre jug. So obviously I'm going to do a 1 litre coolant or antifreeze and 1 litre of water. Okay, now time to grab the water. Okay, that's pretty full. Just to make it easy to pour, I'm going to pour it in and leave it as it is there. Okay, with the jug in hand, let's see if I can pour this in without spilling it all. Of course, the wind gets up. I'll let the system burp out a wee bit just as I fill that. Probably should have filled it a wee bit slower just to try and allow the air to burp back out. We'll come back in a few minutes and see how that goes. As you'll see, with me overfilling that and filling it far too quickly, I've caused a wee airlock in the system here. So what I'm probably going to do is, I've been trying to squeeze the upper radiator hose, which isn't helping me. I'm going to disconnect the upper radiator hose, the one we had removed, to see if we can start letting air into the radiator and therefore allow the coolant to come in. So I'll try that now. Okay folks, disaster averted there, I'm glad to say. You see I've popped off the radiator hose in the upper side of it. That's obviously allowing the air to go into the radiator and allowing me to displace the air so that the coolant and antifreeze mix can actually go in. So the header tank level has dropped down there, which is obviously good news. So we'll keep gradually filling this and see how we get on. And just as a note, just obviously take your time. I was more interested in recording the actual video than properly concentrating on what I was doing there. So slow and steady wins the race in this game. So slowly just keep topping up your antifreeze and that should do the job for you. As mentioned, learnt my lesson, so slow and steady topping this fluid up. You can keep an eye on the upper radiator hose to make sure there isn't any coolant pouring out, but that should be towards the end when the radiator's full. It's probably a good thing to do anyway. It'll obviously make filling the system that bit easier, so I would probably suggest leaving the top radiator off, our radiator hose off, so you can actually bleed the system a wee bit quicker and manually. Okay, time for another jug. That's the first 2 litres in the car. Okay, this is litre number 3 going in. Obviously pause for a wee minute just to let the air and all bleed back out. I'm just going to double check the top radiator hose to make sure nothing's coming out. Okay, that is the 3rd litre in, so we'll just check the level, make sure it's dropping down. I don't know if you can see too well just at the minimum mark, it's sort of slowing up a wee bit there, but it does seem to be going down. Just as a note there folks, at the end of the 3rd litre, just left it for a while. As it was draining down, I could hear it just started drizzling out of the top radiator hose, so there's water coming through in that hose, so I've loosely put the radiator hose back on, so at least we're getting coolant through. So time to top this up a wee bit more using the 4th litre, starting into that. I'm just above the minimum mark in the header tank here. Just keep my eye on that and see if it does go down. And give that a wee minute. Okay, as you'll see, the cap's still off the header tank there. It hasn't dropped its level for quite a few minutes now. It's probably been left half an hour. Really the next stage for me is to start the engine and bleed out the coolant that way. Obviously the water pump running will push and bleed the air back out as it circulates around the system through the heater core and things like that there. So just in preparation for that, double check the top radiator hose, make sure the hose clamp's installed in it, and then I'll adjust the camera and get it ready for starting the car. I'm just checking the levels and going from there. With the top radiator hose there all buttoned up, connected up, hose clamp all in place, we're now good to start this car up. So you can see the radiator cap there is off, so let's start this car and start bleeding it out. I can see bubbles coming through in the header tank there. I have my jug ready just in case. I'll let this run for a few minutes and just see if this burps itself out here. Just as a sort of further explanation here folks, I keep checking some of the water pipes to see if they're getting warm, really to make sure that there's warm coolant flowing through them and the cars start to heat up. Really the aim here is for us to try and get the thermostat to open so that the water's flowing around the full connected system. So I'm squeezing the pipes there that come out of the header tank and the top radiator hose that we've been working on, just giving them a wee squeeze, making sure you're almost trying to force the air out but also keeping an eye on the temperature. So we'll let this run for a few minutes and see how it goes. And as a wee reminder as well folks, you should also have your heating on a high temperature as well. That makes sure the heater core is open and you're trying to get the coolant into the heater core. No big movement on the header tank quite yet, so we'll keep an eye on it. Okay folks, I can see the temperature starting to come up on the car now, so what I'm going to do is top up the fluid here a wee bit more, just for good measure, just to keep an eye on it. And the temperature is about halfway up to full temperature now, so the heat's starting to get into the car. So like I say, what I'll do is I'll top up the fluid a wee bit and keep an eye on this level as the car gets up to full temperature. Okay, that's the header tank all topped up to the maximum mark. Temperature's in full, so I'm going to screw down the cap and allow the coolant system to pressurise properly. Let's see how that goes. There we go, that's it locked. Temperature's in full as I said, so I would say this will come up the pressure pretty quickly, and we'll just keep an eye on the level. And obviously, just as a reminder, you'll have very hot coolant in here pretty quickly, so you don't want to keep removing this cap off, certainly when it's warm and certainly when it's under pressure. Okay folks, just to give you a heads up, shortly after putting the header tank cap back on, temperature was pretty much at full. I could see then obviously the thermostat had opened and the level had dropped back down, so the header tank was getting towards empty. So stopped the engine, took the header tank cap off very carefully and topped it all back up. And I said, just watch, this system is under pressure and it is hot. And I can see that header tank needs topped up again. So this is the stage of just carefully topping it up, letting it burp, topping it up, letting it burp out. Okay folks, that's me been doing that procedure for a while. I've actually left the cap off now that the thermostat's open and it's up to temperature. Roughly, we're doing that back and forth. I've got about 8 litres in so far. So what I'm going to do is put the cap back on, try and get it pressurised and see if the level drops after that again. But I think we're getting towards the point, the process is slowed down where the header tank doesn't keep dropping down. That I think we're getting towards the end of the process now where it's probably bled out. So what it probably needs done is left to cool down a bit and maybe take it for a drive and keep my eye on the levels before and after the drive and see how that goes. Okay, that seems to be the coolant system all bled now. Let the car idle for a bit longer, but it seems to be a-okay now. So now that it's idled for a while, the sort of level seems to have settled out. But as mentioned, I'll leave it for a while to cool down and see if the level changes at all. And it also needs a wee quick drive just to be sure. We'll go from there. Obviously when you're bleeding it all out, keep an eye on your hoses that you were working at. Make sure there's no leaks or anything that way. So I dove under the car a few times just to double check them and make sure there was no leaks. But I'll quickly dive under the car and put the under tray back on, and I think that's pretty much us done. Okay, time to put this under tray back on. Fitting removal of this thing is very easy, as shown you in the removal process, just the opposite of the removal. So I'll quickly put this back up, slide it back on and get the 8 Torx screws and put them back in as well. One wee note of advice I would suggest with the Torx screws, dipping them into a wee bit of copper grease or coating them a wee bit. It just helps the removal because these can rust. Obviously they get a lot of salt and water thrown at them and dirt, etc. as you drive along in the wetter seasons, so good idea putting a wee bit of copper grease on them to make sure they don't totally corrode up, because they can be quite difficult and time consuming to remove otherwise. So we'll quickly blast through the fitting of this under tray. Here we are the following day. just before lunchtime. Obviously the car's cooled down from being driven the previous day, and you can see the level has dropped down. You might not see it totally clearly with the angle in the camera, but it's just above the hose there that goes into the bottom of the header tank. So I'm going to start topping this up. This should hopefully be the last fill required on the reservoir, but obviously keep an eye on the car and the levels over the next few days if you're driving the car. So let's top this up, and just to give you a gauge, this is 200 mils, just to try and work out the levels exactly. I'm obviously keen to try and avoid overfilling the thing, so I'll maybe try another 200 mils there to see where I can get the level up to. And there we go, folks, that's us bang on the maximum mark there. So I'll keep an eye on that level as mentioned as I drive the car about, but that should be us pretty much bled. And obviously I still have some coolant and antifreeze and water and stuff left over. But yeah folks, hopefully that video was of help to you. Bit of a long-winded video. It's a very straightforward video anyway, just a few time-consuming things, bleeding out the car quite a few times, but it's an easy enough job, it just takes a bit of time. And as always folks, feel free to like, share and subscribe. Certainly the subscriptions help massively grow the channel. A bit over 215 subscribers I think at the minute, at the time of recording this video. So as I said before, we're aiming for 500. That's a good wee sort of landmark to aim for. So if you can get any friends or family to subscribe, it all helps. Anyway folks, cheers.